friend. Welcome back to Ashes to Aligned, the podcast for women who've loved someone through addiction, lost themselves in the process, and are finally ready to stop living in survival mode. If you're exhausted from codependency, burned out from emotional chaos, or tired of trying to hold everything together while walking on eggshells, this space is for you. Today, we're talking about what it really takes to find peace when the people you love are still stuck in the middle of a raging storm, and why it's okay to step out of the storm yourself, because you can't find peace in the middle of a tornado. I often described my life, or living with an alcoholic or addict, as being in the center of an erratically moving tornado. Most of the time, tornadoes are fairly predictable. When there's a terrible storm rolling across the plains of Oklahoma or Texas, weather channels and forecasters will show the radar and they'll say, the storm is currently located here and it's moving northeast at 50 miles per hour. In the next 4 minutes, it'll be here. In 7 minutes, it'll be here. And in 10 minutes, it'll be here. Take shelter immediately. And the storm chasers know where to position themselves to be out of harm's way, still get these amazing video and record what's going on. They've got all of their equipment set up and they're streaming video of this phenomenal, awe-inspiring, rotating wall cloud. And they catch the moment that that funnel drops down and the tornado forms. And then they start following it and they document everything as the devastation starts. They've got video and images of the debris being flown up in the air and 2x4s getting tossed all around and eventually ending up embedded in a tree or the side of a house. That's what it's like for our friends and extended family watching the destruction happening in the lives of someone living with addiction, but without the predictability. They're standing off to the side, eyes wide, slack-jawed, confused, probably shaking their heads in disbelief at our heroic but futile efforts to single-handedly try and wrestle this monster under control. They might try to offer some weak words of encouragement or a quick pop in with a hug, but they've learned it's sometimes dangerous for them to get too close to us when we're in beast mode. And really, what do you say to someone who keeps diving into the storm even when it's destroying them? And they can't even see what's happening to them. From inside the storm, the view is very different. It's disorienting. You're getting flipped and flopped and tossed around, and eventually you don't even know which way is up. You can't think clearly. You're just trying to survive. You're dodging all kinds of flying debris. You got the occasional piece of furniture flying by. There goes unpaid bills, court dates, broken promises, shame, heartbreak, and a copious amount of tears that would equal the rainfall of any of those major storms. There might even be the occasional flying cow, because when your world is spinning that fast, nothing makes sense anymore, and there seems to be no limit to the absurdities. And you're just trying to stay on your feet as best as you can. Shake off that dirt and the debris that's clinging to you, and you hope everybody buys it when you say, I'm okay. I'm okay. For years, more than a decade, that's how I operated. That tornado was my daily life. Both of my sons moved to California in 2014. Dusty went out there for rehab first. He went in March and he got into a really great program and was doing well. Now, his addiction started in 2006, late 2006, early 2007. So we were already 7 years into this journey before he found success in early 2014. So after that, then Gray went out at the end of May of 2014. Same parent company, but different programs. They didn't interact with each other, I don't think at all, until they had been there for a couple of months so that they didn't negatively influence each other. And they both did really well for a while. Dusty ended up going to work for the treatment center as an alumni coordinator. He lived in a sober living for more than a year, and then he moved out of that sober living into a sister, I should say brother, house as the manager. He had a lot going on. He was working 2 jobs, the alumni coordinator and managing his sober living. He had a girlfriend, and his focus shifted to all the other things in his life, and he stopped making his recovery a priority. About 18 months after going to California, things took a turn. Gray was doing fairly well. He had a few lapses when he had to come back to North Carolina for court dates. Haven't really touched on this at all yet, but Gray's addiction started mid 2013 after a tragic, horrific accident. So for a while, he had to fly back and forth from California to North Carolina for court dates. He would be clean in California, but then he would come back to North Carolina and all the trauma would get dredged up again. And so he would use while he was here, then he'd go back to California and he would get back on track. I very clearly remember the day I swore I would never, ever again say, the boys are doing really well. It was late June, last week of June or first week of August of 2015. We were at Duke for my husband's treatment. And because we were there so often and he'd been a patient there for so long, all the nurses knew us and everybody loved Charles. So they would ask about our family. How's everyone doing? Well, we were walking down the hallway back to the treatment room, and the nurse said, "How are your sons?" And I let out this huge sigh, and I said, "They're both doing really, really well." And it's so nice to be able to say that. We walked into the treatment room. They got Charles's IV started, and 10 minutes later, Dusty called and said, "Mom, I messed up." The story as I heard it was that his girlfriend relapsed and he found some stuff at her house. He was exhausted from not sleeping well. He hadn't been focused on his recovery and he hadn't been taking care of himself, so he used. And by using, he lost both jobs and got kicked out of his house. So he asked if he could come home for a week just to get his bearings and get some rest and figure out his next steps. And of course, I said yes. Now, we don't have enough time for me to go into all that happened over the next 10 years. It'll all come out as we go forward. But that was the last time he was clean. And that was the beginning of the nightmare for Gray again, too. Because what ended up happening was we moved all of their stuff to California, got them an apartment together, and everything just imploded from there. After Charles passed away, I ended up moving from North Carolina to California. I waited a year, and then I moved out there to be closer to the boys so I could more easily manage the constant crises. They were in Orange County, which is just south of LA, so I moved to San Diego so I could be closer, but not too close. I always say that was like my grand illusion. I actually thought that would work. It didn't. Everyone ended up in San Diego, and Dusty ended up living with me until the day I left him standing on the sidewalk outside of our apartment and drove away in October of 2020. I thought being closer would make things easier to manage. I had flown out there a couple of times. Once when Dusty went missing, I will do a whole separate episode on that one. Once when he had sepsis and was in ICU. Of course, by the time I got there, he had left the hospital, and that is a crazy story that I'll share at some time. And Gray, in addition to trying to manage his own stuff, was trying to help Dusty through bouts of paranoid delusions and schizophrenia. He was driving all around Long Beach one night trying to find Dusty after he'd walked out of yet another hospital, and none of that was fair to Gray. So naturally, I thought if I was closer, I could more easily manage the storm. All that happened was I got sucked into the middle of it and completely lost myself in the process, as well as everything I had except for my car and my life. I was so desperate to save them because I couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone else that I loved. And as someone who is codependent, I believed it was my job. My entire purpose for being, the reason for my existence, was to fix and save them. And if you've ever felt that way too, I want you to know you're not alone. Of course, there was the added bonus that if I could fix them, then I could finally feel better too. But that's not how it works. And one of my major turning points came when I was talking with an uncle who is in recovery. He's actually Charles's uncle. And things were so bad, I had said to Dusty, I don't see any way this ends with Gray other than in tragedy. He was homeless in Laguna, well, in the Laguna area. He was getting arrested a lot. And I needed someone on Charles's side of the family to know that I had done everything I could and it still wasn't enough. So I called and talked to our uncle. And he said, "You know, this isn't your fault, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I guess he heard my half hearted belief that I wasn't responsible for the complete and total breakdown of everything because he was more forceful the second time when he said, "No, listen, you know, this isn't your fault, right?" And I really love, admire, and respect him, and his opinion and his thoughts matter to me. So I took a second to really think about it. And I said, yeah, I know. And he said, good. Because even if it was your fault, even if you were the one who screwed him up, it's still his responsibility to fix his life. He's an adult. It's his responsibility to fix this. And I remember slumping back in my chair. It was like someone had popped me with a pen, and I thought, damn, he's right. He's so right. Gray has to fix this. It's not something I can do. He has to do this for himself. And a massive shift took place inside of me at that point. And while he and I were talking about Gray, I instantly applied that truth bomb that he just dropped on me to Dusty, too. Interesting side note. I was with that uncle over the weekend celebrating July 4th, and I told him I had started this podcast and he had a starring role in this upcoming episode. And he was like, "Me?" And I said, "Yeah, because you were the one who created this major turning point for me." And I shared that story with him. Now, he didn't remember our talk because he was just speaking the truth. It wasn't like it wasn't like creating this huge life-changing moment for him, but I will never forget that conversation. And I'm so grateful for him sharing that wisdom with me. Here's the thing. I have two sons, same mom, different dads, but Dusty's dad left when he was 3 months old, and Charles entered the picture when he was 5. So they had the same basic upbringing, but they are different. They have always been very different. And even now, one's in recovery, the other is not. Gray had this moment of clarity where something clicked, not because I begged or pleaded or cried or manipulated or said just the right thing, but because he was ready for his life to change. And he told the judge, nothing is going to change until something changes. So don't let me out. Just throw me in jail. And that ended up being his turning point. And Dusty, while he has had periods of clean time, he's currently still out there in that wind, living a hard life. And I imagine learning some hard lessons. And I love him so much. But I had to learn to love him without trying to save him. Because every time I tried to yank him out of the tornado, I got sucked right back in too. And that chaos was killing me. That conversation with my uncle helped me understand I couldn't keep waiting for both of them to be clean and safe. I had to decide to save myself. Now, that doesn't mean I don't hurt and then I never cry. I actually have a video of me getting everything set up to start working on this podcast. I just happened to have a camera running. I was collecting some B-roll footage from promo stuff, and I was trying to fix the sound, and I was struggling. And the moment that it all connected and it popped up on my computer screen, I had this yes moment, and then I immediately broke down and started crying. Dusty's degree is in audio production and sound design. And so all of this audio stuff would have been his thing. And in that moment, I was so relieved and proud of myself for figuring it out on my own. But I was also really sad that he's not here doing this with me, because Dusty and I had plans to do this podcast together. The mic I'm using now is one I bought with him back in late 2017, right after I moved to San Diego. Podcast was going to be named Raw: Addiction's Effects on Interpersonal Relationships. And we were going to talk about things that happen to us from our unique perspectives, because addiction's two sides of this coin. Like, you got the addict on one side and the people that love them on the other side. But I told him I would only commit to doing it when he was clean, and I felt like I could count on him to show up each week. And I've been waiting ever since. And even though it's really hard and really scary to think about doing this by myself, and I've had periods of being sad and gotten really emotional at times, I decided that I had to move forward and do it without him. And I talked to him a few weeks ago. He remembered it was Gray's birthday and he called to get his number. He didn't actually end up calling Gray, but he did remember him that day and he was thinking about him. And while I was talking to him, I told him I was doing the podcast, and I heard this huge exhale. Now, he didn't say anything more, so I don't know if he was feeling relief that I'm finally doing it, because he always believed very strongly in sharing our stories to help others. I don't know if he was sad that I'm doing it without him. Of course, he knows he always is more than welcome to join me if he ever decides to do what he needs to do that. But I finally reached the point that I'm strong enough to do this on my own, and I feel the need to do this podcast to help other women, because maybe you're where I was, exhausted, heartbroken, trying to hold on to everyone else, but losing yourself. And I want to help you step out of that raging storm too. Escaping the storm doesn't usually happen all at once. It's not some big dramatic declaration. And I mean, I made those over the years. I made them all the time. That's it. I'm done. Done, 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 done. And then I was, for like 5 minutes, until the next thing popped up and I jumped right back into action. But true recovery is small steps. It's a series of quiet decisions that slowly help you step out of the center, just enough to get some clarity. Then you start to build yourself a sturdy shelter, and then you slowly reclaim your calm. And even if they're still spinning, even if nothing changes around you, you can leave the storm. Your peace doesn't have to wait for their sobriety. If this resonated, maybe helped you see your situation in a little different light, maybe, hopefully, gave you some hope that things can get better, hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when the next episode drops. Share it with a friend who might also be feeling trapped in a storm, and take just a couple more minutes for yourself. Let that storm rage out there without you for just a few more minutes.